Nobody warned Sarah Chen about apartment 4B. When she signed the lease for her new place on the 6th floor of the Ashford Arms, a crumbling red brick building tucked between a bodega and a nail salon on West 114th Street in Harlem, the landlord, Mr. Okafor, had handed her the keys with shaking fingers. She had assumed it was his age. The man was at least 70, with cloudy eyes and a habit of looking just past her shoulder when he spoke, as if he were watching someone stand behind her. She had assumed a lot of things that September. She assumed New York City would feel like a fresh start. She assumed the strange coldness in her hallway was just bad insulation. She assumed the sound she heard every night at exactly 3:17 a.m., a slow, deliberate knock 3 times from somewhere below her feet, was just the building settling. Buildings don't knock, Sarah. Buildings don't knock. She had moved to Manhattan from Columbus, Ohio, after her divorce. 31 years old, a graphic designer who worked remotely with 2 suitcases, a laptop, and the particular kind of loneliness that comes not from being alone, but from having once been loved and then not. The apartment was small, a studio with exposed brick, a radiator that clanged like a prisoner beating on bars, and a window that faced a narrow alley so dark that even noon looked like dusk through it. But the rent was below market, impossibly so for that neighborhood. And Sarah had told herself that in New York, every good deal comes with a catch. She had expected a noisy neighbor, maybe a mouse problem. She had not expected 4B. The first time she heard about the apartment below hers, it was from a woman named Dolores, who lived across the hall in 6A and who had apparently made it her mission to know everything about everyone in the building. Dolores was 60-something Jamaican-American, with reading glasses perpetually pushed up on her forehead and a way of dropping devastating information as casually as commenting on the weather. "You know they haven't rented 4B in almost 2 years," Dolores said one Saturday morning, leaning against her doorframe with a cup of coffee, watching Sarah drag her laundry bag toward the elevator. Sarah paused. "How come?" Dolores looked at her over the rim of her mug. "Because of what happened to the woman who lived there." Sarah waited. "Her name was Margaret Voss," Dolores said, lowering her voice even though the hallway was empty. "Schoolteacher, 60 years old. Lived in that apartment for 22 years. They found her sitting in her rocking chair by the window, still dressed in her coat and gloves, like she was waiting to go somewhere. Medical examiner said she'd been dead for 11 days before anyone noticed." 11 days, Sarah repeated. 11 days, Dolores confirmed. "In this building, with people living above, below, beside her." She shook her head slowly. "You know what bothers me most about that? Not that she died. People die. What bothers me is that she was sitting in that chair facing the door. Not the window, the door. Like she was waiting for someone to come in." The elevator arrived with a groan. Sarah stepped inside, and as the doors closed, she caught one last glimpse of Dolores watching her with an expression that wasn't quite pity and wasn't quite warning, but lived somewhere uncomfortably between the two. That night, Sarah Googled Margaret Voss. She found a brief obituary in the New York Post archives, dated 22 months ago. Margaret Eleanor Voss, age 60, a retired 4th-grade teacher from PS 180 in Harlem. No surviving family listed. No photo. Just 7 lines of text that summarized 60 years of a human life and still somehow managed to say almost nothing about who she actually was. Sarah closed her laptop and sat in the dark for a moment. Then she heard it. 3 knocks, slow and deliberate, from somewhere directly below her. From the floor, or perhaps from the apartment beneath the floor. She counted them without meaning to. 1, 2, 3. She told herself it was the radiator. She did not sleep well that night. The things that happened next did not happen all at once. That's what people don't understand about hauntings. They assume it's like the movies, that something dramatic occurs immediately, that a ghost announces itself with flying furniture and screaming walls. In reality, it moves like water finding cracks. Low, patient, almost gentle at first. The first thing Sarah noticed was the smell. A faint, powdery scent like old perfume, the kind that comes in heavy glass bottles, the kind Sarah's grandmother used to wear, that appeared in her apartment without explanation and without source. It was always strongest near the front door. She bought air freshener. The smell remained underneath it, patient as sediment. The second thing was the rocking chair. She didn't own a rocking chair. She became aware of this fact gradually, the way you become aware that you can no longer remember a word you've known your whole life. She would walk past the corner of her living room and her eyes would drift there, to that specific corner near the window, with a vague sense of something missing, or something expected, as if her brain had catalogued the presence of a chair that her eyes couldn't see. She mentioned it to Dolores. Dolores set down her coffee very carefully. "What corner?" she asked. "The one by the window. The one facing the door." Dolores was quiet for a long moment. "Sarah," she said finally, "Margaret Voss had a rocking chair. Wooden one, with a floral cushion. They found her in it. And from what I remember, Mr. Okafor said they couldn't get rid of the thing. Every time they took it out of the apartment, it ended back up there by morning." He paused. "They eventually just left it. It's still in 4B. Sarah felt the back of her neck go cold. "And the corner you're describing," Dolores continued, her voice barely above a whisper, "is directly above where they found her." October arrived and the nights got longer. Sarah began keeping her lights on after dark. She told herself she was just adjusting to the city, to the sounds of a building that breathed and groaned around her, to the sirens and car horns that never fully stopped even at 3 a.m. She told herself she was a rational person. Rational people do not hear their name called in empty rooms. But she did. Just once, on a Thursday night in mid-October, when she was in the bathroom washing her face, the water running, eyes closed, face buried in a towel. Voice. Clear and close, almost at her ear. A woman's voice, older, saying her name the way a teacher says a student's name when they already know the answer. "Sarah." She spun around so fast she knocked her soap dish into the sink. The bathroom was empty. The hallway beyond the open door was empty. The apartment was silent except for the water still running from the tap and the sound of her own breathing, which had gone very fast and very shallow. She called her friend Marcus in Brooklyn at 11 p.m. and talked to him for 2 hours about nothing. About his job, about a show he was watching, about anything that kept her tethered to the ordinary world. She didn't tell him what she'd heard. She knew how it would sound. She knew how it would sound because she would have said the same thing herself 6 weeks ago. Before West 114th Street. Before the Ashford Arms. Before apartment 4B. The night everything changed was Halloween. Sarah had turned down every invitation. Marcus's party in Brooklyn, her co-workers gathering on Zoom, even Dolores's offer of wine and scary movies across the hall. She wanted to be alone. She wanted to prove to herself, in the specific and silent logic of the sleepless, that she was in control of her own apartment, her own space, her own mind. She ordered Thai food. She watched a documentary about deep-sea creatures. She fell asleep on the couch at around 10 p.m. with all the lights on. She woke up at exactly 3:17 a.m. The apartment was dark. Every light was off. She lay on the couch and stared at the ceiling and felt, with absolute animal certainty, that she was not alone in the room. She did not move. She did not breathe, not really. She just lay there while the darkness arranged itself around her, and the old building groaned once, deeply, like something enormous shifting its weight. Then she heard it. Not from below this time. Not from the floor. From inside the apartment. 3 knocks. Against the inside of the front door. Like someone wanting to leave. Sarah sat up. She reached for her phone on the coffee table and turned on the flashlight with shaking hands and aimed it at the front door. The door was locked. The deadbolt was turned. Chain was on. But the doormat, her plain gray doormat that she'd bought at Target, the one that said welcome in sans serif letters, was not in front of the door where she'd left it. Had been moved. Placed precisely in the center of the room. Placed there with a neatness that was somehow worse than any mess. And on the mat, laid carefully side by side, were 2 things that did not belong to Sarah. A pair of women's gloves. Ivory-colored, slightly yellowed at the fingertips. And a small handwritten note, folded once, written in the careful cursive of someone who had learned penmanship before it stopped being taught in schools. Sarah picked up the note with fingers that felt like they belonged to someone else. It read, Tell them I wasn't waiting to go. I was waiting for someone to come back. There's a difference. Please don't let them forget my name. MV. Sarah was out of the Ashford Arms within a week. She didn't try to explain it to the building management. She didn't ask for her deposit back, though she probably could have fought for it. She called Marcus, told him she needed a couch for a month, and left with her 2 suitcases and her laptop in a cab at 7 in the morning while the city was still grey and half asleep. She did do one thing before she left. She paused at the 5th floor on her way down, the floor just above 4B, and she knocked on the door of 5A, the apartment directly above where Margaret Voss had spent her last 11 days, and asked the young couple who answered, sleepy-eyed and confused, if they had ever noticed anything strange. The woman, barely 25, wrapped in a bathrobe, bit her lip and looked at her husband. Then she looked back at Sarah. "The knocking," she said quietly. 3 times. Every night. At 3:15. Sarah nodded. "Yeah. We called maintenance 3 times. They never found anything." "They won't," Sarah said. Sarah never went back to West 114th Street. But she did one thing months later that she still can't entirely explain. She found the website for PS 180, the school where Margaret Voss had spent her career teaching 4th grade, and she emailed the alumni coordinator. She explained vaguely that she had found something belonging to a former teacher named Margaret Voss, and asked if there was anyone who remembered her. She received 2 weeks later a reply from a woman named Patricia, now 43, a nurse in the Bronx, who had been in Margaret Voss's class in 1992. She said that Mrs. Voss had been her favorite teacher, that she had cried when she found out about her death, that she had always meant to visit the grave but never had. She said that Mrs. Voss used to tell her students, at the end of every school year, the same thing. "Even when you've forgotten me," she used to say, "I'll still be remembering you." Sarah read that email sitting at her desk in Marcus's apartment in Brooklyn, with traffic noise coming through the window and afternoon light crossing the floor, and she felt something shift very quietly in the room. Not cold. Not the specific dread of West 114th Street. Something else. Something that took her a long time to name. Felt like relief. Like the release of breath that someone had been holding for a very long time. She wrote back to Patricia. She told her about the gloves. She told her about the note. She did not expect to be believed. She found that she didn't need to be. Patricia wrote back one sentence. "Thank you for saying her name. Sarah still lives in Brooklyn. She still works as a graphic designer. She still sometimes wakes at 3 a.m., and she lies very still and listens, and when she hears nothing, when the night is just traffic and a distant train and her own pulse, she feels grateful in a way that's hard to describe to anyone who hasn't spent time in a place where the silence means something else entirely." She kept the gloves. They're in a shoebox on the top shelf of her closet. She's never been sure why. Maybe because throwing them away felt wrong. Maybe because some things are passed to us not by choice but by geography, by the specific coordinates of loss we stumble into when we are ourselves most lost. Or maybe because every once in a while on the hard nights, she takes the box down and looks at those small ivory gloves and remembers that somewhere in this vast and indifferent city, a woman sat in a chair and waited not for death, but for someone to come back. And that the loneliest thing in the world isn't dying alone. It's being forgotten. And now you know her name. Margaret Eleanor Voss. Say it once. That's all she ever wanted.